Yes. And empathy is, to me, one of the great keys of life in many different ways, but especially as a lawyer. Listening and listening with empathy and understanding and trying to put yourself in your client's shoes to understand what they really want, right? And trying to give them what they want and not just mechanically go through the legal process in a wooden or mechanical way where the client knows that you truly do care and that you're really actually working towards the goal that they really have.
Welcome to Sterling Insights, Stand Out and Supercharge Your Assets, the go-to podcast for financial advisors aiming to grow their assets under management, stand out in a crowded market, and retain assets nearly forever. Are you advising high net worth clients who own appreciated capital assets? Do you want to help them sell without losing a quarter, a third, or even more of their hard-earned profits to capital gains taxes? Then this podcast is tailored for you. Each episode brings you the latest strategies and expert advice from leading financial advisors, seasoned attorneys, and experienced CPAs. Learn how to maximize your clients' wealth, minimize their taxes, and supercharge your advisory practice with actionable insights. Join us on Sterling Insights, Stand Out and Supercharge Your Assets, where you'll gain the knowledge and tools to set yourself apart and achieve unparalleled success in wealth management. Subscribe now and empower your practice for a brighter, more prosperous future.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of the Sterling Insights Supercharge Your Assets podcast. This is Peter Florio. I'm the founding member of the Florio Wealth Management Group, and I'll be your guest for today's podcast. I'm joined here today by Evan Schwartz, an attorney in the law firm Schwartz, Conroy, and Hack. Evan is a highly skilled litigator with more than 30 years of experience litigating insurance recovery claims, as well as complex federal and state litigation. Evan has a stellar reputation in handling complex insurance recovery litigation matters in both federal and state courts. Includes setting legal precedent in insurance recovery law that continue to influence and govern the current state of the law. Evan has represented policyholders exclusively, and his induction into the multi-million-dollar Advocates Forum underscores his excellence in advocacy, recognizing his success in obtaining verdicts, awards, and settlements for his clients. And Evan is also frequently called upon to speak on insurance claims and litigation matters. Welcome, Evan, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Peter.
So, Evan, what I like to do when I'm starting out is to ask our guests how they got started, on this career path. What inspired you to become an attorney? Did you have any experiences that influenced your decision, where'd you go to law school, things like that?
So I was a college student at Boston University. I was a journalism major, and I realized that I didn't want to have a career in journalism. I didn't want, at the time, and this was 1987, when I was graduating, I didn't want to go to a small Midwest town and work for a local paper. I actually did that in Huntington on Long Island while I was a law student. I was a reporter for a local newspaper in Huntington. And so I kind of knew what that was. And you don't start your career at a major media market fresh out of journalism school. I wasn't sure what I really wanted to do, but I settled on law because I thought, if you're a lawyer, you can serve clients and learn about their businesses without actually having to do that business for a living. So, for example, there was a period of time where my firm represented Minuteman Press. Minuteman Press is a printing press franchise, and I learned a lot about the printing press business, but I never had to be in the printing press business. It worked out in that sense. The idea that I could learn a lot about a lot of professions through the law and by being a lawyer without doing them kept my multitasking mind engaged and has continued to do so now for 35 plus years. I think 35 years since I graduated law school in 2000. And I went to Truro on Long Island which was originally also in Huntington. Many years ago, they moved out to Central Islip. So I was a local Long Island product. And my office has been and remains on Long Island since I started working as a lawyer and opened my own practice in 1994. That was on Long Island. I'm still on Long Island. Although I have an office in the city, Long Island's still been a base for me.
Okay. That's an interesting perspective about getting experience in all these different businesses. I guess if you decide you want to stop being an attorney, there's probably 30 or 40 things you could now do, right? So,
Well, in the insurance recovery space, we represent professionals in long-term disability claims and litigation. That's one of my insurance recovery niches. I've learned more about weird medical conditions and how doctors deal with them and discovering how to figure out what's going on with someone physically, mentally. It's been really quite an interesting education, at least in that particular niche, just in learning about medicine and symptoms and what affects people's ability to work in a job or to function. So that's been cool too. Like all these little different vignettes of life that we get to learn about through the law, which I love.
yeah, so I know a little bit about what you're talking about when it comes to that aspect. Yeah, certainly do. How did you get to your, being a partner in your own firm? How did you go from where you started to where you are right now?
So I've always had, I guess, the bone of wanting to own my own firm. I reconnected recently with my first job out of law school. I was a law clerk at the New York Court of Appeals, and I was with we were a total of 4 people. And I'm still in touch with the other 3 that I worked with from 1990 to 1992 up in Albany. And I was speaking with one of them recently where we're laughing about how all 3 of them never worked in their own private law firm and never were going to own a law firm. But they always told me in that 2 years, you're going to be the one that owns a law firm. And I used to say, how do you know that? You don't know that I'm going to own a law firm. But I guess I've just always had the want. And so after I left the Court of Appeals and I had my first job at the big firm, I kind of looked at what they were doing and I didn't want to be a partner in somebody else's law firm. Like I wanted to pick my partners and I wanted to make my own choices. And so in 1994, after only being a lawyer for 4 years, I opened my own practice. And so 2 years at the Court of Appeals, 2 years at this other job. And in January of 94, I went out on my own. After doing that since 1994, which is now over 30 years of being a law firm owner, I realized that I'm now unemployable because I don't like doing what other people want me to do and having to sort of fit into an organization and follow those rules and protocols. So I wouldn't do well in that type of an organization at this point. Maybe that's why I have the entrepreneurial bone. I always say I like to make choices and I'm willing to make them and I'm willing to live with the consequences of the choices I make.
Yeah, I think that's a common thread amongst any entrepreneur, anybody who starts their own business. Yeah.
Thanks.
So what are some of the biggest challenges that you face? Maybe some common issues that you deal with?
Well, I would say one of the biggest challenges for lawyers is lawyers are not taught how to run a business. And so you come out of law school, you've learned the Socratic method, you've learned how to read and study case law, you've learned how to spot issues, you've learned all these things, but nobody teaches you how to interface with a client, how to sign up a client, where to go to get your workers' comp insurance, where to go to set up a bank account, how to set up your bank accounts, what a banking relationship looks like, how to deal with all of the issues surrounding employment. And then not only do you not learn any of that, but you're also not taught how to run in a business well and efficiently. So my wife spent her career in banking. And all the things that I'm doing at my firm are things she did her whole career that I didn't know about. Like having a firm mission, having vision, having core values, having financial excellence, having operational excellence, having KPIs, all these things that are like, even now I talk to a lot of lawyers and they say to me, what's a KPI? KPI? What is that? Right? And so the failure of the legal system to ready lawyers to actually be a lawyer that could be in a private practice and understand what goes on in a private practice is what's been probably my biggest career challenge throughout my practice as a lawyer and as an owner, either completely or 50-50 since 1994.
Yeah, I think that's a common problem with anybody that starts a business. There's no manual with regard to how to run that business. We have a coach who says everybody is in a marketing business. It's just a matter of what you're marketing. So you're marketing legal services. How do you do that and how do you run your business? But that's so true. It's not a matter of just hanging out the shingle, right?
And I did that and I had no idea what I was doing. I was a solo for 2 years from 94 to 96. And I always say my learning curve was like a rocket ship.
Yeah.
Taking off into the sky for those 2 years because there was just so much I didn't know and had to figure out about running a business. The basics, like you said, just the basic stuff that I had no idea.
Well, you've been doing this for a while. What do you think are some of the major changes in what you do or maybe your industry over the last, 10, 15 years?
Well, law firms, the unique part of law firms that I see problematic is that a law firm is not a high value business. It's a professional practice that's based on relationships with clients. There's no restriction against unfair competition. A lawyer has always been the exception to the rule that anybody could go out, leave a firm and take all their clients because the law recognizes that clients have the absolute right to pick their attorney and there should be no restrictions on that, right? So that affected the value where the typical value of a law practice is like 1 time's earnings. You get no multiples on it. And on top of that, you can't fee share. So there's been a dearth of investment money into law firms. That's been what it's been, and it's a problem. So you build this wonderful law practice, but you can't sell it for any real value. Whereas someone who's manufacturing steel screws can sell it for 10x what it's worth and make a fortune. You as a lawyer with all your training and education and that work, you don't get that. So that's been an issue, and that's starting to change. 2 things that are changing the practice of law is that a number of states have now changed those rules to allow non-lawyers to invest in law firms, but it's not nationwide yet, but it's coming. And AI and investment outside non-lawyers investing in law practices, that's the change that's really going to be very, very significant, especially for the lawyers that are law firm owners, probably after me. I may catch it on the tail end, but likely it's going to be for the next generation.
Okay. So I'm sure that, there are a lot of cases that have obviously ended well. Is there any particular success story that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, well, so we've had an enormous number of successes and our culture is built around results. We really, really want to get results and excellence for clients in results. But one of the game-changing things that I did back in the 2000s was I discovered that a particular large disability insurer was really basically they were evaluating claims based on their quarterly profitability and their obligation to report to Wall Street. They were a publicly traded company, and they were shutting down claims at the end of each quarter, terminating claims to hit numbers. And that infected their entire claims process. And myself and one of my current partners were sitting in the office one day and we're like, we can't represent all these clients that have policies they got through employers for $1,000 a month, $1,200 a month, $1,400 a month. They can't afford us to go take on their own individual claim, and thousands of people are getting the shaft. And this is awful, and we need to do something about it. And so we brought a claims practices class action against this company in 2002. And as a result, to try to moot out our class action, they entered into a 50-state settlement with all the regulators in all the states to basically set aside a bunch of money and reevaluate all their claims that they had put through what I like to call their dirty factory, and give the people who they were screwing a fair shake. So that claims practices class action was a game changer in the industry at the time. And it was a really, really cool result. One of my other favorite quick stories is when I first opened my practice with one of my first partner in 1996, we opened our practice and we were contacted by, this is where we started representing Minuteman Press. The founder and CEO of Minuteman Press and the general counsel wanted us to do some work for them, but also wanted my partner to become their general counsel. But he was forming a firm with me. And he said, look, we're not doing that, but if you want us to do work for you, we'll do some work for you. And they hired us to try a federal and state fraud and civil RICO case where a bunch of franchisees were trying to take down the entire company. And they hired us to try the case. So instead of, giving us this case like, oh, let's go after this franchisee that's not paying their royalties, or, we have a contract claim that, they're like, their very first case was try this massive fraud and civil RICO case in federal court where the company's business is at stake. And we opened our doors in January of 1996. We had a party in like February or March, and all these people came. And after the party, we basically shut the firm down and prepped for and tried this case in March and got a defense verdict, won the case. So it was a great way for us as partners to start off our practice.
Really, you can make a movie out of that.
It was crazy, but it was great. It was fun.
So, Evan, what's most important about what you do, for your clients? What gives you the most satisfaction, and what does that mean to you?
When I first got my first job with a big law firm, they represented insurance companies. And representing insurance companies is great. It's fine, but there's no emotion around representing a big insurance company. You're typically, as an outside law firm, you're reporting to an inside lawyer. You're not speaking to the board. You're not speaking to the owners. And it's just another matter. Even when you win, it doesn't matter. But when you're out representing individuals or small business owners, and even small business owners own big companies, right, that are controlled by one or two or three people, it's very real when you're helping a small company, or even a big company run by one person or an individual. They're emotional, they're sad, they're happy, they're upset, they're real. And I love getting with people and getting real with them about their problems. And I love sourcing the solutions to their problems. I'm very solution oriented and looking about how quickly I can get from A to B for a client without going through the rigmarole and without bogging them down in the legal process. So getting those great results and then taking care of our clients to get those results is really still what makes me very happy. And I spend a lot more time on the strategic things now than I do in the weeds. But I am still involved in a lot of the cases, and I'm still playing a role in those.
That's great. I'm sure that goes a long way towards developing a really good relationship with clients because they get the impression you really care, right? So,
yes, and empathy is, to me, one of the great keys of life in many different ways, but especially as a lawyer. Listening with empathy and understanding, and trying to put yourself in your client's shoes to understand what they really want, right? And trying to give them what they want and not just mechanically go through the legal process in a wooden or mechanical way where the client knows that you truly do care and that you're really actually working towards the goal that they really have. Empathy is a key. That's my style, to truly listen with intent and allow your clients to speak and understand what they want.
So when you take on a new client, do you find that there's maybe one or two common misconceptions that they have initially when you start a new relationship?
Yes, I think there is a viewpoint about lawyers sometimes that is shaped by, the world, where they're not going to get someone who is listening with empathy, who has some kindness, who is going to not just say, and demystification of the law in a sense of, here's what we're going to do to try to help you. Here's the roadmap that we think is going to make sense to get you from A to B, so that they can actually understand it without having to get into the weeds of what, the procedural complexities or the substantive complexities. How do you break that down in a way where you actually explain it to the client and that the law isn't this secret society to them, right? So it's breaking down that I'm actually listening, I actually care. Instead, here's how I think this is going to go, and here's how I think this is going to end, and here's a few variables for you to think about.
Yeah, it sounds like initially they might be closed, but then as you explain the process of what you're doing, it becomes more open, and that's where that trust comes in. Okay. What do you think separates your firm from other firms that work in the same space?
Number one, we have a wonderful culture. So everybody on my team loves being part of the firm and loves helping each other achieve an outcome. That includes position-wise, because I don't view every person has value and they have equal value. They just have a different role. So if you were going to say someone who is in the least senior role in the firm versus the most senior role, from me to whatever you would describe as a lower senior role, whether it's a receptionist or a bookkeeper or whatever you're going to describe as from the bottom to the top of the food chain of a firm, they all feel valued and they're all always willing and able to help each other. It's a culture of teamwork and teamwork is what gets results, where everybody cares about what everybody else is doing. So that's one big differentiator. And then just the absolute focus on client service and results. I'm not saying that necessarily is different than every other firm, but it's something that is imbued in the executive team and flows down to everybody in my organization.
Okay. Would you say that you have an ideal client? Is there someone that fits your ideal client?
In the insurance recovery space, it's going to be a business that has a problem anywhere from, let's say, 750,000 to 15 million, maybe a little higher, whether it's a problem in claim and it hasn't yet morphed into a lawsuit. Because there are really big firms in the insurance recovery space, we get a lot of that middle market, 750,000 to 15, maybe 20 million. Those types of problems in that space are where our current client base in the business insurance recovery space exist. We do a lot of business litigation. We don't market for it because it's not a brand. It's a contract claim, right?
Okay.
It can have a lot of other facets to it, but it's a business litigation. It just happens to have the unique features of insurance law that don't necessarily apply to some other type of business litigation.
Okay. So when you're dealing with clients, is there a general concept or idea about, the process that you like to get across? Was there maybe one concept that is important?
I think there are two concepts. One is communication is critical, and I want my clients to communicate and not to be afraid to communicate with me. And two, that we are outcome driven and that I want to work together with the client to get an outcome as quickly and efficiently as possible. And if they understand that we are outcome driven and not trying to make someone's difficult life more difficult than it already is, because when they come to my firm, they usually have a problem. Mm-hmm. And I used to joke around that I've discovered the secret to what every client wants from their lawyer, and I know what it is. And the client will say, what's that? It's say, to spend as little time with me and as little money on me as humanly possible. Right? Why? Well, because you're in a lawsuit. It's distracting. It's expensive. You want it to be over. You don't want to be talking with your lawyer all day long. You got business to conduct. You got a life to live. Doesn't mean you don't need to communicate with them, but let's not turn that into a 4-hour movie.
Okay.
So.
Well, Evan, it's been a real pleasure to speak with you today. Could you tell our audience how they can find you? Email, phone number, website?
Yeah, the website is www.schlawpc.com, which is also my email address, ess@schlawpc.com. It used to be, when I first formed the firm, it was Schwartz Law PC. Now it's SCH because it's Schwartz, Conroy, and Hack. But it's the same three initials of my last name. So instead of Schwartz Law, it's now SCH Law PC. So I always tell people I got rid of the warts. You can get to there, and you can always call the main number on Long Island, 516-745-1. Been that number since 1996. And I want to thank you for having me and for having this conversation. It's been really enjoyable for me.
Well, listen, it was great having you on the podcast, and I know that our listeners learned a great deal from you today. I certainly did. And I want to thank you for providing us with some really valuable and helpful information. I look forward to speaking with you again soon.
All right, Peter. Thank you so much.
You too. Be well.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Sterling Insights. Stand out and supercharge your assets, where we provide the info you need from successful leading financial advisors, lawyers, and CPAs. Your hosts, Roger and Catherine Silk, invite you to learn more about Sterling Foundation Management by visiting sterlingfoundations.com.